Today we're going to be talking about how to create or keep motivation in school. Stay tuned and watch. Okay, so why am I making this topic? Well, a subscriber off YouTube joined my email newsletter and he asked, he's like, honestly, my biggest problem right now that I want your help with is finding motivation in school. And he was like, I'm sorry I don't have any more details because that's really all it is. It's just I don't feel motivated in school. So I'm going to give you a few different schools of thought from successful people and then just give you my own thoughts. Because there's a few different interpretations. Now you have the entrepreneurial and kind of business worthy approach from Gary Vaynerchuk. And I think this one's more suited for people who are kind of focused on starting a business one day, or that's where their head is at, which is not everyone. Some people actually want to get a employee type of job. But his advice is basically, if you're not motivated in school, that means that school isn't for you. It's not something you're passionate about, forget about it. And he often points to his own life where he was basically lazy and unproductive and super unmotivated in school. He would have thought he was like one of the worst students ever. But then you look at his life now. He's this rich, successful entrepreneur, and he says that he found his passion through other areas outside of school, and that's just a sign that you need to kind of get out of school and do something that you enjoy. So that's one approach. And by the way, I'm behind this backdrop because I thought it's kind of relevant. I found something cool that's probably better than just standing behind a wall like I usually do. So that's definitely one approach. And there's definitely a grain of truth to that. Maybe you start tasting and testing stuff as he suggests, and maybe it's something they don't teach in school. Maybe it's graphic design, maybe it's video editing, maybe it's buying and selling lemonade or drop shipping. Maybe it's none of those things and you have to keep trying. The one thing I would say I don't necessarily agree with this philosophy is that it definitely can push people to just quit on school before they should. There's maybe some classes, some courses that you haven't tried yet that really speaks to you. Maybe a teacher you haven't met yet that really speaks to you. Maybe it's Greek, maybe it's Latin, maybe it's history, maybe it's world history, not American history. Maybe it's something you won't see until college, a certain type of architecture class. You just don't know. So there's definitely a part of that. And also, I feel like most people have at least one thing in school that they actually like, which is, different from hating everything in school. So, at least for me and, many others, you may not like, say, social studies, but you may like English, depending on the teacher and what you're reading, and you might like Spanish class and those are signs of stuff that you are already motivated in, that you do look forward to. Maybe it's certain moments in physics class when you get to see the teacher, create this experiment and blow up a volcano made of baking soda or something. So there's definitely moments that you probably already grasp and you enjoy, and that's what you can kind of dive into to further extend your love and maybe find a career in one day. So nonetheless, that's Gary's approach, and it has some merit. Just like stop trying, that's just something that you're never gonna like. Find what you do like. Unfortunately, I would just add, go for it, but take Gary's tip with a bit of caution. And the caution I would add is that it definitely helps. Easy to just give up on something before giving it a real try. To just give up on everything and just say, I'm not passionate about anything, I don't like anything, and to just help them kind of fail at school and continue to rationalize they're not doing well. I think for me, I've definitely been able to turn around my performance in school when I moved from regular to gifted and talented, the course load got really heavy and really bad, and I couldn't keep up for a while, and my grades started to drop. And then, as you've seen in my other videos, you know, I had that whole story of how I met someone who I hung around, and he was just really good at school, and through that I looked at it through an entirely different lens, and all of a sudden I started to, almost without consciously being aware of it, mimicking like how he studies and practices, and all of a sudden it started to become fun again, and I started to like some of my classes more than others, and I started to enjoy it again, started to perform well. And there's definitely, you know, parts of school that I did enjoy, like psychology class, some English classes, and so forth. So yeah, there's definitely an element of seeing things from a different angle, and that's something I would add to it as well. You know, there's definitely been classes where I didn't like it at first, but then I found a different teacher, a different way of learning that, and there's so many different angles you could look at the same topic at. Nowadays, even with YouTube, there's animated videos that teach it in a fun way, and all of a sudden something that's boring in history becomes, whoa, that's a lot of fighting and killing and action and combat, and that's actually pretty fun and interesting. And this guy died, and this guy slit that guy's throat, and you know, he betrayed him, and that stuff all happened in real life. You know, it gets really fun. Even Netflix has these documentaries. I just watched a samurai documentary, and here's me, you know, a person who used to hate history. So, you know, you look at it from a different angle. That's my personal advice on how you can find certain things more fun. I mean, I wouldn't have found history as fun a few years ago, but now I saw this samurai documentary, and you realize, man, there was a lot of betrayal and fighting and like backstabbing to get to the top, and all this like crooked behavior, and it's like, wow, that was a real world that actually existed with all that armor and fighting and armies of samurai. It was crazy, very exciting to watch. So I've covered one perspective, Gary. What's another? I've covered my perspective, and what's another successful people? What do they have to say about motivation? So there's another school or camp of people who kind of touch on kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and fulfillment. You know, if you talk to someone like Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, or you talk about people who, you know, really touch on the study of happiness. It's called positive psychology. They talk about like different levels and levels of motivation. So like the primal level is just like food, water, survival. But as you go up, you start to look for other things like passion, purpose, and so forth. And so I've covered this in other videos on motivation and fulfillment on my channel. So definitely watch all those. But one of the big things is, you know, what really drives you. And this is something that's often set from birth, and as you age, you can learn more about it. So for some people, their big driver is helping others. You really dig into why they do everything they do, why they volunteer, why they choose to go into healthcare, and they like science. It's because they want to help others through medicine or something else. And that's a huge driver for some. And if you focus on that driver, you can kind of build this enduring motivation to keep moving on. Another motivator might just be, you know, the love of an activity. And there's different areas you can love about it. I love the learning new things. Some others just might love it for the sake of the topic itself. And unfortunately with school, they do give you this whole list of items that you can love. And it's almost like, you know, to get straight A's, or what they consider like the pinnacle, is if you loved every single part of it. The issue with that is, you know, that's like saying I'm passionate about everything in the world. So in theory, you can't really be exceptionally motivated by everything. But if you find one of these higher motivators, these long-term motivators, like I did in a couple recent videos, I touched on the study that showed that students who had these long-term goals, like having a better family one day, or having enough money, or having a good job, these students performed a lot better. And so if you can touch on those motivating goals, maybe the topics in the micro may not be the super most interesting, but in that way, they don't have to be. You don't have to subscribe to the Gary philosophy that they have to be red hot passions. You just need to know, like, this is a conduit to my end goal of helping others, of having a good family one day. And that will motivate you to keep trying and trying. So, ultimately motivation comes down to why. There's a whole book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. I think he made a lot of money and he got really famous off of it. But the basic idea is he gives all these stories of people who succeeded and failed. And the reason was because they didn't have the right why they were doing it. I highly recommend you check it out and read it. But essentially one of the stories features the Wright brothers. So basically it was the Wright brothers versus, like, I think the government. And the government had like tens of millions more dollars. And they both were trying to figure out how to make flying machines, now known as airplanes. And of course, the Wright brothers succeeded, whereas the super funded, rich organization failed. And why was that? Well, the Wright brothers, they loved it. They loved it. It was their dream. It was their passion. And so they would never quit because of that, despite multiple failures. Whereas the government, they're driven by greed and profits. And of course, that was not a strong enough motivator. Some people, I've definitely heard this a lot of times. It definitely annoys me a bit, but there is some truth to it, because I don't necessarily agree. But, some people will say, oh, you need to have a super strong why if you want to do anything good. If you want to make $1 million, you have to have some crazy why. Like, your mom has to be having cancer and you need that money ASAP to pay for surgery. That type of thing, I definitely see there's a certain level of truth there. Like back in the day, I listened to hundreds of episodes of Addicted to Success. It's a podcast that interviews like millionaires and stuff. And the host, he said, like, after interviewing a lot of these people, it seems like the people who were more successful, they had stronger whys, like their family was in the hospital or something. And yeah, there's definitely some truth to that, but is that controllable? Like, you can't just give your mother cancer. Like, that's not really controllable. And so one part I didn't like is that, first off, it's something you can't control. And so it's almost like saying, yeah, you don't have a big enough sob story, so, too bad you're not motivated. And then two, it's also being like, well, you really have to have this crazy extreme story to succeed. And that's not the case. You've seen people like Warren Buffett, Sarah Blakely. They loved what they did, and they loved it so much that they built a passion and a career out of it. It doesn't have to come from this crazy place of, extreme why. Now, that being said, having that does help, but, how much can you control that? So then it all seems to come back to passion or some long-term driver or motivator, which ultimately means, at least in the realm of school, which is just a small rules. It's a small part of your life in the long run. First off, I would say don't worry as much about straight A's as you might think. Is that really going to help you in the long run as much as you think? Probably not. There's been studies that show that straight A's those students don't always lead to the most successful lives. But if you still want to get straight A's and you still want to, get to that high motivating level, even if you're not the most passionate about the subjects and you try different perspectives and stuff, use those other tips. Try and find some long-term goal that you're looking towards. Find out what your drivers are, whether it's to help others or maybe there's some level of passion you can latch on to in some of these topics. I think a lot of it still does come down to your passion of it. And then the other half comes down to finding some other driver or motivator and then hacking the system. because that's what I did. I got a lot of motivation out of just doing well and beating the system. You know, when I saw those good grades, I was like, it's working. You know, my study methods are working. And even if I didn't really like the topic to the moon, I enjoyed the process of it. And that's another philosophy of school of thought, one that I'll end on, which is that, you know, you have gurus like Ramit Sethi who say, oh, it's not about finding your passion, it's about doing something, and the more you succeed at it, the more passionate you'll become about the success and progress. So it's kind of a weird way of thinking about it. I think it's partially true. Like, there's still only so much passion you can get out of it, even if you get more and more successful at something that you don't particularly enjoy. But there is definitely a little bit of that energy and motivation that you get each time you see another success. You know, when you turn that D into a C, the C into a B, you build off that even if you don't like the topic or the course itself as much. So there you have it. Ultimately, you know, it's a question that'll never have a full answer. It's kind of like one of those philosophical questions like what's the meaning of life, in a way. You know, there's always books being written about it and stuff, but I think with these clues and thoughts, you've gotten a much stronger grasp and understanding, at least enough to start to taste and try different things and see what works for you. You know, motivation, like it or not, I personally believe there's a bit of luck involved. Like, some people, they just, in my opinion, they find stuff that they really enjoy that just so happens to align with something that makes a lot of money, whether that's music production or business, and they're just really good at it too, because they love it so much. So, you know, sometimes not everyone, I mean, consider the fact there's billions of us out there, not everyone has all these things just line up right off the bat. That being said, I think, you know, as you go through life, you will be shocked how many things that you didn't think you'd be passionate about, that given through a new lens or a new avenue, you are. So, at least for me, stick to my technique of looking at things from different perspectives. CrossFit. I thought it was too intimidating, a bunch of like beefed up men, you know, just shouting and throwing barbells around. But I found a gym that was very friendly. It was family friendly. It was more of like, you know, average people coming in and out, and that really made me look at it from a different view. And you know, I've been part of that gym for like 4.5, 5 years now. You know, same thing with a lot of other things. If you just kind of look at it from a different perspective, take my history example, it can help. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think motivation is something that people, you know, always ask about. It's a hot topic in the personal development space. It's always asked about along with procrastination, and I think in terms of an answer, like, there's not going to be something that's going to be like, okay, what you want, which is most people asking that seem to be saying, I really hate this thing and I'm trying to find some secret to like loving it and just doing it all the time. There's certain tactics and techniques that I've shared already that no one else really mentions often, but even with all those being said, if you're in that type of situation where you just straight up hate it, in the long run, it's probably best to just switch to something else. And once you get to a certain area in life, you can, like college and after college. But in that time, you know, it is what it is. Like, you're never gonna really 100% love it. It's possible, you know, with my history example, you know, it is possible by just like seeing it from different perspectives. But if that's the case and you're stuck in that stage where just because of the crappy system, you have to get an A in history and you hate history, You know, take it as a short-term thing for the next 4 years or 2 years until you get to college. Treat it as a game. Like, you hate this, but you're gonna beat the system and study it, and you know, find fun in beating that system until you can just not take that class anymore.